The silence before the storm. The Taraxian Empire had ruled the outer spiral for 3,000 years. Their sensor arrays stretched across 14 star systems, monitoring every flicker of light, every whisper of radiation, every anomaly that dared disturb the cosmic silence. Nothing moved through their territory without their knowledge. Nothing arrived without their permission. The Empire's eyes saw everything, and what they saw, they controlled. But on the 73rd day of the harvest season, something changed. The sensors didn't fail, not exactly. They simply stopped making sense. Admiral Kethran stood on the observation deck of the Imperial flagship Sovereign Dawn, his forearms clasped behind his rigid spine, staring at the holographic display that dominated the command center. The image showed nothing. Empty space. The same empty space that had been there for centuries. Yet every sensor, every quantum detector, every gravimetric scanner screamed that something massive was approaching. The readings were impossible. The numbers contradicted themselves. Mass signatures appeared and vanished. Energy readings spiked 2 levels that should have been visible across half the galaxy. Yet the visual spectrum showed only darkness and distant stars. "Report," Kethron commanded, his voice carrying the weight of authority that came from 5 decades of military service. Chief Sensor Officer Vinthal S. Hands trembled as she manipulated the holographic interface, her usually confident demeanor shattered by "Admiral, the gravitational distortions suggest something larger than a battle fleet, larger than a planetary station. The mass readings are equivalent to a small moon, but there's nothing there. Thermal signatures are non-existent. No electromagnetic emissions, no quantum wake. It's as if space itself is ... wrong." Kethron's primary eyes narrowed while his secondary pair scanned the tactical display. In all his years commanding the frontier defense, he had encountered many threats. The Krell swarms with their biological ships, the synthetic Concordat with their reality-bending technology, the mysterious void wraiths that existed between dimensions. He had faced them all and emerged victorious. But this was different. This wasn't an enemy he could see or understand. This was something that defied the very laws that governed their understanding of the universe. "Distance?" he asked. "That's the problem, sir. Based on gravitational lensing, it should be 3 light hours away. Based on quantum displacement, it's already here. Based on visual confirmation, there's nothing at all." Across the bridge, junior officers whispered among themselves, their voices carrying notes of fear that military discipline could barely contain. Some of the older crew members had heard stories, ancient tales dismissed as mythology by the educated elite. Stories of the silence that walks, of empires that vanished overnight, of warnings carved into dead worlds in languages so old their meaning had been lost to time. One phrase appeared in those warnings, translated imperfectly across 1,000 tongues: "When the void moves with purpose, kneel or be forgotten." Kethron activated the fleet-wide communication channel. All vessels maintain defensive formation Alpha. Power weapons to standby. Deploy advanced reconnaissance drones. I want every available scanner focused on Sector 97. If there's something out there, we will find it. 200 warships adjusted their positions with practiced precision, their hulls bristling with weapons that could crack planets and shields that could withstand stellar radiation. The Taraxian Empire didn't become the dominant power in the outer spiral by cowering before the unknown. They became dominant by confronting every threat with overwhelming force and absolute certainty. The reconnaissance drones launched. their quantum engines propelling them toward the anomaly at speeds that bent the laws of physics. Advanced sensors probed the darkness, searching for anything heat, light, matter, energy, anything that could explain the impossible readings. For 17 minutes, the drones transmitted streams of contradictory data. Then, one by one, they went silent. Not destroyed, not damaged, simply gone, as if they had crossed some invisible threshold and ceased to exist. Catherine felt something he hadn't experienced in decades: genuine uncertainty. Communications: send a priority alert to Imperial Command. Code Omega: unknown massive object approaching Imperial territory. Nature undetermined. All other fleet groups are to maintain high alert status. Before the communications officer could respond, every screen on the bridge flickered, the main holographic display distorted, pixels fragmenting into patterns that hurt to look at directly. For 3 seconds, the laws of light and mathematics seemed negotiable. Then the display stabilized, showing something that made the Admiral's blood run cold. There, materializing from nothing like a nightmare taking physical form, was a structure. But structure was too small a word for what hung in the void before them. It was a construct of such immense scale that the human no-weight the sensor array struggled to capture its full dimensions. Kilometers became meaningless. The thing stretched across space like a sleeping god, its surface a nightmare of geometry that twisted and reformed even as they watched. Angular sections that seemed to exist in more than 3 dimensions. Surfaces that reflected starlight in colors that had no names. And silence. Absolute, total silence where there should have been energy signatures, heat dispersion, anything that indicated something made by living beings. Admiral Kethron stood frozen, his military training warring with an primal instinct that whispered one simple truth: they had found something that was never meant to be found. Or worse, something had found them, and somewhere in the darkness beyond that impossible structure, something ancient was waking up the weight of ancient silence. Bridge of the Sovereign Dawn had fallen into a silence that matched the void outside. 200 pairs of eyes across the Taraxian fleet stared at their displays, trying to comprehend what their instruments insisted was real. The structure riff, it could be called, that defied every principle of engineering the Empire had mastered over millennia. Its surface seemed to drink in light rather than reflect it, creating an absence in space that was somehow more present than the stars around it. Admiral Kethron watched as his tactical officers struggled to calculate its dimensions, their computers throwing error messages as the measurements kept changing, not because the object was moving, but because reality itself seemed uncertain about how large it actually was. "Sir, we're receiving something," the communications officer announced, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's not a standard transmission. It's not even using electromagnetic radiation. The signal is being written directly into our quantum communication buffers, as if it's bypassing our receivers entirely and speaking to our systems from the inside." Kethron's scales rippled with unease. "Play it." What emerged from the speakers wasn't sound in any conventional sense. It was a pattern, a rhythm that resonated in bones and circuits alike. Those who heard it later would struggle to describe it. Some called it music without melody. Others said it felt like mathematics given voice. And a few unfortunate souls claimed it was the sound of empty space remembering what it meant to be full. But beneath the alien harmony, there were words, not in any language the Empire's translators recognized, yet somehow understood by every being who heard them. as if the meaning was being carved directly into their consciousness. "We heard your call across the silence. We have returned." The message repeated 3 times, each iteration adding layers of meaning that hadn't been there before. The 3rd time, Junior Tactical Officer Rentok gasped and pointed at his screen. "Admiral, the linguistic analysis. It's showing matches. Fragmentary, ancient, but matches. This language, parts of it are Proto-Terrac, parts are early Krell. Sections match the synthetic concordat's root code languages. But they're all woven together with something older, something our databases classify as pre-contact Eritrea." "Sir, that doesn't make sense. Terran civilization was wiped out in the Convergence Wars 4 centuries ago. There's nothing left of Earth except radiation and orbital debris." Catherine felt his combat instincts warring with something deeper than uncomfortable. Realization that what he thought was history might have been incomplete, or worse, deliberately edited. The Convergence Wars had been the turning point in galactic history, when the young species called humanity had reached for the stars, only to be crushed by the combined might of a dozen older civilizations who saw their rapid expansion as a threat. The official records stated that Earth had been rendered uninhabitable, its colonies scattered and absorbed into other empires, its people reduced to refugees and laborers in systems that had once feared their potential. The Empire had participated in that war. Catherine himself had studied the battle reports as a cadet, learning how overwhelming force could neutralize even the most dangerous emerging threats. But if humans were extinct, what was this thing that spoke with their language woven into its voice? The structure began to move, not with engines or thrusters, but as if space itself was rearranging to accommodate it. The fleet's proximity, alarms shrieked as the impossible construct crossed distances that should have taken hours in mere seconds, not by traveling through space, but by making space irrelevant. It stopped precisely 1 million kilometers from the Imperial formation, close enough to be threatening, far enough to demonstrate restraint. Up close, details emerged that made the structure even more incomprehensible. Sections of it were clearly technological, covered in what looked like sensor arrays and weapon emplacements. Other areas seemed organic, pulsing with patterns that resembled neural networks grown to planetary scale, and threaded through everything with symbols, mathematical, linguistic, artistic, a database written across a surface larger than most moons. "Admiral, we're detecting power fluctuations inside the structure," Vinthal reported, her voice steadier now, training overriding fear. "Multiple reactor signatures. No, not reactors. These energy readings, they're harnessing zero-point energy directly from vacuum fluctuations. The theoretical efficiency would be... This is technology centuries beyond our current capabilities. Maybe millennia." A new message came through, and this time the voice was clearer, almost familiar in its cadence despite the alien harmonics. "You stand in the territory you claimed from our ruins. You built your empire on the ashes of our hope. We do not blame you. Survival requires harsh choices, and you made yours. But understand this, we made ours as well. When you thought you had destroyed us, we were learning. When you thought you had scattered us beyond recovery, we were building. When you celebrated our extinction, we were becoming something you could never imagine. We are the children of Earth, transformed by necessity into something that can ensure we are never again vulnerable to those who fear what they cannot control." The words hung in the artificial atmosphere of the bridge like a physical weight. Catherine's mind raced through the implications. If this was truly human, any significant portion of humanity had survived and hidden themselves for 4 centuries while developing technology that made the Empire look primitive. Then every strategic calculation he'd ever made was based on false assumptions. The balance of power in the outer spiral, perhaps in the entire galaxy, was not what anyone believed it to be. "They're launching something," a tactical officer called out. "Multiple objects, small, moving toward our position at..." "Admiral, they're not moving through space. They're appearing at sequential points. Some kind of short-range dimensional transit." Catherine's hands moved to his weapon controls, but something made him pause. If this human remnant wanted to attack, they could have done so already. These objects were moving slowly, deliberately, broadcasting peaceful intent through every action. "Hold fire. Let them approach. Raise shields but do not power weapons beyond standby." The objects resolved on the visual displays as small craft, each roughly the size of a courier ship. Their design incorporating elements that were recognizably human, the same aesthetic preferences for symmetry and efficient curves that had characterized Terran vessels, but evolved beyond recognition with technologies that blended biology, quantum mechanics, and something else that defied classification. The craft arranged themselves in a pattern around the Imperial flagship, not threatening, not submissive, but equal, waiting. Another message arrived, and this time it came with visual data. The screens showed a figure, humanoid but clearly modified by centuries of adaptation and augmentation. The face was recognizable as human despite the subtle differences, eyes that held too much depth, as if they could see across spectrums invisible to others. Skin that seemed to shimmer with embedded technology. An expression that carried the weight of 400 years of collective memory and survival. "I am Navok Chen, speaking for the Remnant Fleet. We have watched you from the shadows, Admiral Keth. We know your name, your service record, your reputation as a fair commander who follows the ancient codes of honorable warfare. We chose to reveal ourselves to you because what approaches requires more than military might to face. 3 days ago, our deep space monitors detected something emerging from the galactic core. Something that makes us look like children playing with toys. Something that doesn't care about our conflicts, our borders, or our history. It comes to harvest, and it will not distinguish between Taraxian or human, predator or prey. We came to offer you a choice: stand with us and perhaps survive what's coming, or stand alone and certainly fall." The holographic display shifted, showing sensor data that made Admiral Kethron's blood run cold for the second time in less than an hour. Beyond the remnant fleet's position, something vast was indeed approaching. Not a ship or a structure, but a phenomenon, a wave of distortion that was consuming everything in its path, breaking down matter and energy into component parts and rearranging them according to rules that predated current physics. The ancient enemy, the one the old warnings had tried to describe, was finally here, and humanity, the species they thought they'd destroyed, was offering them salvation. Asterisk.